You ever say something so bold, so unapologetically real, that it makes people clutch their pearls like they just saw the end of college football? Well, that's what Coach Prime did again. And this time, Paul Finebaum was not having it. Let's set the scene. Deion Sanders, yes, that Deion, wasn't just talking about football recently. He was talking about what football has become. Specifically, the mess that is the nil era. And Coach Prime didn't sugarcoat a thing. He called out, if you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed. The chaos, the lack of structure, the danger of letting teenagers swim in oceans of money without life jackets. He said what many coaches have whispered behind closed doors. But because he said it, suddenly he's the villain. Enter Paul Finebaum. Finebaum didn't just critique Sanders' comments. He went full character assassination, calling him a hypocrite, accusing him of benefiting from the same nil madness he now critiques, and suggesting that Sanders only wants control, not fairness. And folks, the backlash was immediate. Because here's the thing. What Finebaum painted as hypocrisy, a whole lot of fans and players and former athletes and analysts saw as leadership. Let's be real. Coach Prime isn't new to this. He's been in locker rooms since the 80s. He knows what fame can do to a young athlete. And while nil has opened doors for player empowerment, and yes, equity, it's also opened a Pandora's box. Overnight millionaires. Freshmen with agents before they've even earned a snap. Locker rooms divided between the nil haves and the have-nots. So when Coach Prime speaks on this, he's not punching down. He's pulling the brakes on a runaway train. But the moment Deion suggested there should be a salary cap, a little structure, maybe even a little accountability, here came the gatekeepers. Suddenly, it was, how dare you, Deion? As if Coach Prime isn't allowed to evolve, or to lead in a way that disrupts the old guard's comfort zone. And that's where this gets interesting, because this isn't just about NIL. It's not even really about Deion versus Finebaum. This is about control. About who gets to speak truth in college football. About who gets to lead. Let's not pretend that Sanders' leadership hasn't been rubbing people the wrong way since day one. From the moment he showed up at Jackson State in that suit and cowboy hat, speaking faith and fire and accountability, people have been trying to cut him down to size. And when he jumped to Colorado, they called him flashy, said he was selling hype, not substance. When he flipped top recruits, he's exploiting the system. When he won games, well, let's see if he can sustain it. It's always something. And now, he dares to speak on the instability of the system. And the exact same media that roasted coaches for saying nothing about nil suddenly have too much to say when a black coach finally steps up. Let's break this down. Coach Prime is calling for structure, not silence, not a rollback, not an end to NIL, but guidelines. Why? Because these kids, yes, kids, are stepping into business deals before they know what compound interest is. They're getting flashy cars and million-dollar contracts before they've passed a midterm. And the people who are supposed to protect them, they're too scared to speak. Except Prime. So no, he's not a hypocrite. He's a visionary. But Finebaum's response? That wasn't analysis. That was narrative control. That was the media's reflexive discomfort with black leadership that doesn't ask for permission. When Nick Saban calls for change, it's wisdom. When Dabo Swinney rants about player compensation, it's concern. But when Deion calls for balance, suddenly it's self-interest. That double standard, it's loud, and fans see it. They see a coach who prays with his players, who teaches them how to build wealth and character, a man who speaks from the pulpit and the playbook, a man raising sons in front of the nation and turning his locker room into a mentorship pipeline. And they also see a sports media culture that's more comfortable with Coach Prime as a punchline than a prototype. What Finebaum either doesn't understand or refuses to admit is that Coach Prime's platform is bigger than football. He's not just shaping a team. He's shaping a generation. He's telling young black athletes that they don't have to beg to lead, that they can bring their culture, their faith, their confidence, unfiltered, into any space and own it. That's what this backlash is really about. Because if Deion Sanders, with his gold chains, fatherly love, and unapologetic leadership, can redefine what it means to be a head coach, then the old playbook, it's out the window. Let's be clear. Coach Prime isn't perfect. Nobody is. He's brash. He's loud. He makes waves. But he also shows up every day with intention. He builds. He mentors. He transforms. And most importantly, he cares. So when he talked about the danger of Nil creating superstars with no structure, it's not because he wants a gatekeep. It's because he wants these young men to last, to build generational wealth, not one-year windfalls, to be leaders, not just logos. And if Finebaum or anyone else finds that threatening, that says more about them than it does about him. Let's take a step back and ask a real question. How many other coaches are having real conversations about nil and financial literacy with their players? How many are talking about mental health, fatherhood, and accountability on national stages? Coach Prime is. And for all the drama people claim he brings, the results are impossible to ignore. Even after Colorado lost some of its momentum late last season, Sanders' program is still thriving. Why? Because he's not building around just winning games. He's building around changing lives. So the next time someone calls him a hypocrite, ask this. Is it hypocritical to grow? Is it hypocritical to want better for the same players you're mentoring? Or is it just threatening when the voice of reason comes in gold chains and cleats instead of khakis and a headset? Because what really has people shook isn't that Deion Sanders wants a better system. It's that people are finally listening. The game is changing, and Coach Prime isn't waiting for permission. So here's the bottom line. You don't have to agree with everything Deion Sanders says. You don't have to love his style. But you do have to respect the impact, because he's doing what college football has needed for years, flipping the script. And if that makes the old guard uncomfortable, good, because comfort is what kept the system broken in. Let's not get it twisted. This wasn't just a bad take from Paul Finebaum. This was a strategic takedown. A line drawn in the turf between the way college football was and the way it's going to be. Because what Deion represents isn't just boldness, flash, or controversy. What he represents is disruption. The kind of disruption that makes the old guard nervous. That makes buttoned-up athletic departments clutch their legacy pearls and whisper, "What is he doing here?" And yet it's working. See, Deion Sanders didn't wait for a blueprint. He became the blueprint. From Jackson State to Colorado, he's flipped the script on what a college football coach looks like, talks like, and fights for. And the fact that he didn't have to beg for respect, that he came in the door expecting it, is what really rattles the system. That's what Finebaum's reaction exposed. It wasn't just disagreement over nil structure. It was the unspoken fury that Coach Prime dared to enter their sacred space with a gold chain and a gospel sermon, and still demanded to be taken seriously. Because let's be honest, if Nick Saban had called for a salary cap, it would be treated like gospel. ESPN panels would light up with "Saban has a point." Every columnist from Alabama to Connecticut would be nodding along, talking about how the game needs a reset. But when Deion says it, it's a scandal. He's accused of turning his back on the very system that elevated him, as if he didn't walk into Jackson State without a dollar sign in sight, as if he didn't bring exposure, money, and opportunity into a program most media networks couldn't even find on a map before he showed up. So let's kill the hypocrisy narrative right here. You can benefit from a system and still criticize it. You can use nil to elevate your players and still say, "Hey, this is getting out of control. Let's fix it before it breaks more kids." That's not hypocrisy. That's leadership. But Finebaum's audience? They're used to coaches staying quiet, staying neutral, and staying in their lane. Deion is doing none of the above. He's making noise, yes, but he's also making change. And not just for black athletes. Not just for Colorado. He's setting a precedent that coaches, especially black coaches, don't have to check their identity at the door. Let's talk about that. Because part of this outrage isn't just about NIL. It's about the way Coach Prime carries himself. The faith, the flash, the fatherhood, the authenticity. It doesn't fit the traditional head coach mold. It's not buttoned up. It's not reserved. It's not humble in the performative way some folks like. But guess what? It works. He doesn't have to perform humility when he's already walking in purpose. He doesn't need to beg for credibility when he is the credibility. And the kids see that. That's why recruits are choosing Colorado over blue blood programs. Not just because of facilities or nil packages, but because of what DEION represents. He's the coach who tells you, keep your head high. The one who lets you be yourself, as long as you bring the work. The one who prays with you, pushes you, and still tells you to call your mama. So when someone like Finebaum tries to reduce that to hypocrisy, it doesn't just miss the point, it exposes the agenda. Let's look at the facts. Deion Sanders has created more conversations around nil fairness, HBCU investment, athlete empowerment, and black leadership than anyone else in the sport. Period. He's changed recruiting pipelines. He's shaken up TV ratings. He's got NFL-level attention on a college program that won one game before he arrived. So is it really about NIL, or is it about control? Because the truth is, college football is going through an identity crisis. The money is flowing, but the leadership model is still stuck in the past. Coaches are getting million-dollar contracts, while players are being told to be grateful for a dorm room and a Twitter graphic. That's why Coach Prime's message is dangerous to people like Finebaum, because it tells young athletes, you're not just a product. You're a brand, a business, a man. And when you add accountability and purpose to that message, that's a revolution. So where do we go from here? We go forward, with or without the approval of old school pundits. Because this movement, it's bigger than one press conference, bigger than one ESPN segment. Coach Prime is lighting a fire under college football, not just to win games, but to fix the broken parts of the system no one else wanted to talk about. And to be clear, he's not anti-NIL. He's pro-structure, pro-stability, pro-player. That's what Paul Finebaum didn't understand. He thought calling Deion Sanders a hypocrite would stick, that it would turn fans away, that it would weaken his credibility. Instead, it only made the movement louder. And what's really poetic, the more they try to bury him in narratives, the more he grows. They called him arrogant, and he built culture. They said he was too flashy, and he drew recruits. They said he was too unorthodox, and he changed lives. So no, you don't get to cancel Coach Prime with one hot take. You don't get to erase everything he's built because you're uncomfortable with how he's doing it, because he's not playing your game. He's building his own. And now it's time for every coach, player, parent, and fan to decide. Are we cleaning the past, or are we stepping into a future where leadership looks different, speaks different, leads different? Because like it or not, Deion Sanders is no longer just coaching football. He's coaching a movement. And whether Paul Finebaum wants to admit it or not, the scoreboard's already changing. So the next time you hear someone call Deion a hypocrite, ask them this. What are you doing to protect these players? What are you building that lasts? Because from where we're sitting, Coach Prime isn't the one hiding behind a microphone. He's the one putting on the helmet and walking into the fire. And that's not hypocrisy. That's legacy. You'd think by now they'd know better. You'd think. After Deion Sanders walked into a 1-11 Colorado program and turned it into the most talked about team in America, before a single down was even played, that the college football establishment would have learned to stop underestimating him. But no, instead of listening, instead of observing, they doubled down. They ran the same tired script they've used for decades. He's too flashy. He doesn't respect the game. He's just in it for himself. And now, they've added a new one to the pile. Hypocrite. The irony is unreal. They're accusing Deion of hypocrisy, because he has the nerve to evolve his opinion, to change with the sport, to advocate for structure in a system that's anything but structured, and somehow that's scandalous? Let's get one thing straight. This isn't about NIL. Not really. This is about who's allowed to speak with authority, who's allowed to critique the system, who gets the benefit of the doubt, and who gets ripped apart the second they say something that makes the gatekeepers uncomfortable. The minute Deion Sanders stepped into coaching, not as a token assistant, not as a PR figure, but as a real head coach with real vision, he became a threat, not because of what he said, but because of what he represented. Let's take it back to Jackson State. When Sanders showed up at an HBCU with NFL-caliber training staff, camera crews, custom suits, and a message louder than the band, they said it was performative. When he landed top-tier recruits, they said it was shady. When he challenged the FBS to schedule HBCUs and neutral site games, they said he was unrealistic. But here's the truth that still makes people squirm. Coach Prime built more from less. He created buzz, visibility, and opportunity where there was none. He didn't just coach a team, he elevated a community. So when he made the jump to Colorado, people were ready with pitchforks. He abandoned the mission. He sold out. He's not ready for Power 5. But he was. He was ready. The players were ready, and the program wasn't just ready. It was desperate for the attention, the relevance, the change. And with every viral clip, every sold-out press conference, every primeism that spread like wildfire online, the establishment grew more uncomfortable because Coach Prime didn't fit their mold. He's not quiet. He's not deferential. He's not pretending to be anything but himself. And that's what they really can't handle. This is where the Paul Finebaums of the world come in. They don't just report on college football. They shape its public perception. And when someone like Sanders threatens to tilt the board, that perception becomes a weapon. The goal is subtle but effective. Delegitimize. Call him a hypocrite. Frame him as contradictory. Use his own words against him. Hope that fans, especially the casual ones, start to question his integrity. But here's where it falls apart. Because people aren't stupid. They can see the difference between genuine concern and orchestrated outrage. When Deion Sanders says the NIL system needs structure, he's not saying NIL is bad. He's saying, without guidelines, we are setting these kids up for failure. He's seen it firsthand. Freshmen getting six-figure deals and losing it all in a year. Agents making promises they can't keep. Locker rooms divided over who's getting paid and who's not. And more importantly, he's seen what it looks like when young black athletes are treated like stock instead of people. That's why he's talking about salary caps. Not to restrict earning, but to create sustainability. To make sure there's enough to go around. And that it doesn't ruin lives before they begin. But when Coach Prime says that, he's a hypocrite. When a white coach like Dabo Swinney says it, he's looking out for the kids. That's not a coincidence. It's the same double standard that has followed black leadership in sports for generations. The same lens that scrutinized John Thompson, Tony Dungy, Lovie Smith, Strong, vocal leaders who didn't fit the default mold and made people nervous simply by being themselves. So no, this isn't just about Sanders' nil comments. This is about who's allowed to lead with confidence and who gets called arrogant, who's allowed to evolve their thinking, and who gets called inconsistent. It's about why Coach Prime can wear shades and a gold chain and get accused of being unserious, while another coach can scream at 19-year-old on the sideline and be called passionate. It's the same playbook, the same fear, the same resistance to change. But here's the kicker. The change is already here. Deion isn't a one-season wonder. He's not a gimmick. He's not a YouTube thumbnail. He is a force, and no amount of media spin is going to put that genie back in the bottle. He's coaching kids to become men. He's taking 3-star recruits and making them believe they're NFL material. He's changing what it means to belong in elite coaching circles. And he's doing it his way. You know what's really ironic? Coach Prime would have been fine keeping it quiet, letting his team's performance speak, letting his coaching tree grow over time, letting the wins stack up. But Paul Finebaum and the like couldn't let that happen. They had to try to pull the plug. They had to throw shots. They had to drag him into the mud, and now they've amplified the message. Because now even people who weren't watching are suddenly listening. The comments, the clips, the conversations, they're bigger than before. Not because Deion clapped back, but because he didn't have to. He let the fans see the difference between pettiness and purpose, between talking at players and walking with them. And that's the part they'll never understand. Coach Prime doesn't need permission to lead. He never did. So when media figures try to gatekeep, all they're doing is proving his point, that the system fears change more than it fears failure. Let's be real. College football has been broken for years. Coaches making millions. Players risking concussions for scholarships. Bowl games that matter more to TV sponsors than to students. And now that players finally have some power, now that they can get paid, transfer freely, and have a voice, now they want regulation. Please, DEION is one of the few calling for balance, not censorship, not control, just a system that works for everyone, not just the top 1%. That's not hypocrisy. That's vision. And when history looks back at this era of college football, the nil chaos, the transfer portal surge, the collapse of traditional conferences, one name will rise to the top, not because he won every game, but because he changed the conversation. Deion Sanders didn't just challenge the scoreboard. He challenged the scorekeepers. And for that, he'll never be forgotten. So yeah, keep calling him a hypocrite if you want. But remember this, movements don't stop because a talking head got salty. They stop when the work is done. And Coach Prime, he's just getting started. If you're riding with Sanders, drop a comment and tell us what you think. Is he the future of college football? Is he building something bigger than the game? And if you're still skeptical, that's fine. Just make sure you're watching. Because the next time someone calls him a hypocrite, he just might be holding a championship trophy when he answers.